Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of Striking Ground. I am honored to let you guys know that we have a special guest on today that I'm so excited about. We have none other than the World MMA Awards from 2009, 2010, and 2011, 3 consecutive years, World Award winner, who's going to be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame sooner than you know it, the one and only Greg Jackson. Greg, how are you, sir?
I'm very honored to be on your podcast, sir. Thank you for having me very much.
Thank you. I'm so happy to have you on. How's your day going?
Couldn't be better, boss. Couldn't be better. It's been a great day. I get to make a new friend and go to work. Yeah. What else am I going to do with my day? It's wonderful.
Well, I thank God for that. Thank God for that. So I wanted to get right in, and I got so much I wanted to talk about. So if you could just tell me a little bit about yourself as far as like where you grew up in and kind of like how did you start getting involved in the sport?
Well, I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I grew up in a place called the South Valley. It was a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, and I was the only white kid around, really.
Okay.
A couple of us, but again, very similar to your story. You kind of learned you had to learn how to fight. That's the only thing they really respected, right? They didn't care if you were good at math or you could play soccer, and the only thing that anybody really respected was could you fight. And if you wanted to have your own opinions about stuff and you wanted respect, well, then you always had to back that up. You could never just like everybody wasn't equal. It was all about the respect. So I figured, well, I better learn how to do this stuff so I could get some respect and have some dignity. And that was the origin, really. So I didn't watch a Bruce Lee movie or anything like that and get inspired. It was all just necessity based. Like I just had to figure the stuff out. I opened my school when I was 17 in 1992. And shortly thereafter, the UFC came out. Thank God for the Gracie family that came and kind of revolutionized what we were doing in martial arts. And my students talked me into. I never really wanted to be a coach or anything. My students talked me into the competitions in like 1994, 95 ish, I think. And
Wow.
yeah, I thought we do okay because we were kind of doing a prototype of MMA. But I mean, nothing on the level like the Gracies were, but kind of, I always say I was in kindergarten and they were kind of like the PhDs, the doctors. But we're trying to figure it out. And I thought, yeah, we do okay in these competitions, and we started winning. And of course, then my students wanted to do it all the time. And 30 some odd years later, here I am talking to you. But I mean, that's kind of the short version of where I come from. But I'm not a violent person. I'm not an angry person or anything like that. I don't know, if I was like a nice white boy in Delaware or something, I probably would have been another job. But yeah, here I was, and here I am. And I feel lucky, not everybody gets the opportunities that you and I have. And I just feel really lucky to be here.
Yes, definitely. I do feel that just being appreciative is attached to a lot, gratitude is attached to a lot of success.
Mhm.
Ultimately, I'm just fortunate for having humble beginnings as such as yourself. I feel like it gives us what I like to call the advantage of the wooden spoon.
That's a great saying.
Thank
Beautiful.
I love it. I'm just happy that you're on. So another thing I would like to ask you is, so did you have any brothers or sisters growing up in the house?
I did.
Like
I have
twins?
a little brother who's actually almost the same age as you and your older brother, but he's my younger brother, 2.5 years younger. And yeah, he came up with me. His name's Matt, and just a wonderful human being, a great guy.
Absolutely, that's a blessing. Hello to Matt. So the Jackson Winklejohn, your camp, how were you guys ahead of the curve so early? I mean, like, was Rashad Evans your first champion?
Was he the first UFC champion?
UFC
We had
champion.
Yeah, because we had a bunch of King of the Cage, all the smaller shows we had done pretty well. Was he the first? I think he was the first one. I want to say that's correct. Boy, it's been a lot of years, and I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed,
Yeah.
but I believe that is correct. Yeah, he won the reality show, and then yeah, I think he was the first title holder that we had. Although, was George before him, or was he before George? I can't remember. I think he was before George. It's either
Well,
him or GSP, one or the other. I can't remember which one.
oh man, that iconic photo. Wow,
Yeah,
what was it like training GSP? What is it like?
such a George is so brave, and he's such a good person. And what I always really liked about him is he was a martial artist first and a fighter second. Like he just loved the martial arts. He fought because he liked the lifestyle it gave him, and it gave an excuse to train and all these things. But he's just a sweetheart of a person. I haven't met a guy that said a bad thing about George St. Pierre. I'll put it that way, and there's a reason for that. He's a wonderful human, and I was extremely lucky to train him for the years that I did. Yeah, I really count my blessings on that one.
Wow, yeah. Every time I see him, at least I've never met him in person, he seems just like a great human being. And I know that it had to be fortunate just to work with each other, meeting of the minds, because he seems like a very cerebral fighter as well.
Super smart, and it really was on my part. I think it was really, I got in early, so I got really lucky in a lot of these situations where, I don't know if I would have that same luck today. So I count my blessings where I got them, and I was lucky to get in early.
Man, I hear you, because it was like everybody's trying to go to Jackson Winklejohn. They want to go to Albuquerque so that they could train over there with these masterminds, right? Huge gym. And there you can't please everybody, but what if you want to kind of go over a little bit, like I was just curious, how was the dynamics of the Rashad kind of digging up some old stuff and John Jones when he came? Like, how did you guys work that out?
Well, a lot of it, that was my fault. That was a growing experience. So I didn't really have at that time protocols, because our big thing is that we don't want to fight each other.
Okay.
Um, so we didn't really have protocols set in place for when we do have to fight each other. So that was a hard lesson in leadership for me, because I didn't have, okay, here's what's going to happen if you guys have to fight each other. So it turned into a lot of drama, and Rashad was upset, and then John was upset. And really underlying all of that, that was my fault. Like, looking back, I wish I would have been a little smarter and said, eh, when you guys get to the fight for the title, right? Because you can't deny people their dreams. And so when you guys fight for the title, here's how it's going to go, which we have those protocols in place now. And we really haven't had drama at that level since then. But that was such a hard lesson for me. Because remember, I was so young then too. I mean, I'm not smart now, and I was even dumber when I was younger. But it really, like, those are the things that you look back on and you say, okay, I made those mistakes. I don't want to do that again. How can I grow and move forward? So it
Hmm.
was a lot of drama when Rashad said, okay, John can come on the team. But then, all things happen, and then John wanted to fight Rashad, and Rashad really got upset. And yeah, it was kind of a nightmare in a lot of ways, really. It was a bad day. And
Man.
yeah, I mean, I have to take full responsibility for that situation. And man, I'm just lucky that I figured it out a little bit at least, and now I don't have to go through all that again. Because ugh,
Well, you know what? It wasn't a complete loss, was it? It was actually a lesson.
it
So,
really was, and it made us better and stronger. But like a lot of times in life, when you look back and you go, man, I'm glad I don't have to do that twice.
yeah, well, as long as we could prevent it now, we'll feel like it was some part of a win, right?
That's what I try to say, keep positive about it.
Absolutely. That's my motto. Continue being, I had to be positive.
Yeah.
That's what we got to do continually. So let's get on to a couple questions here. Greg, I wanted to ask you, what do you think about this youth right now as far as the when you were getting into it, there wasn't too much of the people being on the smartphones and stuff like that. And
Right.
from what I'm just seeing walking outside, like yeah, a lot of people are kind of glued to them, and the attention span, I'm sure, is decreasing. Is that making it more difficult inside the gym for you and the students?
Yes and no. We were just talking about this yesterday. It's kind of a mix. The Gen Z generation is a little bit of a mixed bag. You get some part of it is you get like some of that, right, where you're a little hyper focused on your phone and you forget what it's like to go play in the front yard when the water there's puddles and stuff like that. There's a little bit of that. But I'll also say that, like, I was really impressed with, so I'm Gen X, right? And we're just savages, man. We're just wild, like, the Gen Z kids are so respectful and kind and courteous, and I know there's bad and good everywhere, but I was
Mm-hmm.
really impressed with my daughter and my son's friends, just how sweet they are, how kind they are. They don't party like my generation did. You don't see them going as hard as we did, and I think that's a really positive thing. So
I
while
agree.
I think that, like, you should probably put the phone down and look at the sunset every once in a while. I think that'd be a beautiful thing. But at the same time, like, the flip side to that is, I think they've learned a lot because they have access to all of these. Like, you can see what, if you're going to do cocaine your whole life, you can see on the phone what that's going to do to you, right? Like, you see these
Wow.
videos of these people, and so they really, I think they're learning from a lot of our mistakes. Whereas Gen X, we didn't have any idea. We were just like again, we were just savages, man. We're just like feral kids, just figuring it all out and not a lot of guidance. And I think that the Gen Z has a superior on that. And I'm a hopeful person, so I'm hoping that they'll eventually get a hang of the social media stuff and maybe put down their phones a little bit.
Yeah, well, I just don't want it to interfere with their physical, like getting outside. And, that's what
Right.
makes you more wiry, right? Like we were outside
Right.
all day, you stay in more shape. You get inside of the gym versus a kid that's been on his phone the whole day. He could be your twin. You're doing this, he's doing that. And you're going to kind of be able to just manhandle him, right?
That's a
Uh,
fact.
so as long as they're in the gym, so you guys got like a rule, no phones while you're in there? Kind of like on,
Yeah, anybody that's on their phone, yeah, in the gym that we've got, you wouldn't have it on for long because it's a
okay.
very active gym. Everybody's jumping on each other and having a great time. And our goal is to make it because we're competing with the internet, right? So the goal is to make it so fun to be physical that you don't even think about your phone for that hour or two that you're in the gym. So that's kind of it's so hard to compete with a thing that's designed to hold your attention every 20 seconds, right? Like these
Yeah.
influencers, and I mean, they're just brilliant people. They know exactly how to manipulate your mind. So to compete with that, we try to make it just as fun as possible. So, and that's our goal is to make it so fun you forgot about your phone. You weren't even thinking about it.
Now, there's a thin line between, because you strike me as a very kind person. I believe it takes one to know one.
Hmm.
Where do you draw the line? Is it you don't come into these doors unless you're ready to just listen? Because that's just very important, at least for me. Do people try to run, or are you more stern in the gym? Like,
Well, I try to be so. What I learned early on is if you're yelling all the time, if you're like all the time, it just becomes noise. They don't listen to you. But if you're nice to them and like give them a lot of respect, but then they do something wrong or they'll push a button or they just overstep their bounds or they're not paying attention and then you yell at them, that has an effect. If you're the sweetest, nicest guy and then you say, damn it, who put the timer on? This, that selfish, who's the self centered idiot that did like all of a sudden everybody's like, wait, what? What's happening? It really has an impact so that I try to be respectful and kind as much as I can, but I'll flip my switch at the drop of a hat if I see something that I don't agree with. And, usually I give them a chance. I'll be like, what is this? What's going on? And if they're still being like, my big thing is sometimes my fighters, if I'm doing the fighting class, they'll get heated and I'll say, okay, that's enough. And then they won't stop. Oh my God, I'll lose my mind. Like, yeah, dad gets mad, as I like to say, and at that point, then everybody stops and listens because I'm not yelling at you all the time. I'm not angry all the time. I'm very kind until I see a reason to not be kind. And even then, I'm doing it for your benefit. I'm still like it's still like a kindness. It's just you've got to listen. And me talking in this tone of voice is not going to work. So I try to save that few and far between when I really need it to make an impact, so they'll actually change that behavior.
yeah. Well, what about constructive criticism? How important is that you instill that into your fighters?
And that's what a great topic to bring up. How you criticize is so important, right? Because what you should be doing, at least in my opinion as a coach, is that constructive criticism should be moving forward in your development. If you're just yelling at them like, "Oh man, you suck. What's wrong with you?" Like, there's no. Again, it's not constructive, right? You're just basically berating them because you're in a bad mood or whatever. So
Hmm.
I try to keep the tone pretty similar to normal talking, but I just try to point out exactly how to fix. So I don't say what they're doing wrong. I just go to immediately how to fix what they're doing. So if I say your jab's horrible, that's not going to right that immediately they shut down. But if I say, "Hey, why don't you try jabbing like this?" That I feel gets a little bit better response from them and a little more attention to detail. So that's just my methodology of doing constructive criticism.
So, from a bit of my observation, to me, it seems like you're very tactful. And I think that skill that you have goes pretty far with these fighters. You're graceful when dealing with others, you know, uh, instead of just telling them, hey, that sucks like that. You'd be like, hey, I think it looked a little better that time. You threw it a few times before that. Let's try that again.
Right.
You know,
Right. Exactly.
like, yeah, you're very tactful. I like that about you, Mr. Jackson. Let's get to
Oh,
another
thank you.
question. Yeah, you're welcome. I really do. So, what are some vital points that you personally feel that are necessary outside of like speed, power, cardio, and stuff like that? What are some vital things mentally that you instill into your fighters that are just super important to you?
That's another great question. That's a lot of it has to do with how you deal with your process. And what I mean by that is as you get better, right? So it's not just what you have to have talent, right? Like that's baseline. You've got to be able a great athlete, you've got to be coachable, right? You've got to listen. But I look for as I'm yes, sir. But as I've gotten older, I really look for kind of the intangibles and a lot of that is how do you deal with pressure? How do you, and I don't mean negative pressure because negative pressure is very easy for a real fighter to deal with, right? Like telling you that you can't do something is just motivation for you. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, I'll show you. You know what I mean? Like you get that
Mhm.
chip on your shoulder, you rock and roll. But what do you do when everybody says, you're the greatest striker I've ever seen? Coach, you're the greatest coach I've ever seen. And you can be like, you can be humble for a little while, but you hear that day after day, month after month. Pretty soon your brain starts going, you know what? Maybe I am the greatest striker in the world. Maybe I am the coolest dude. And so a lot of it, how you deal with the fans, with the pressure of the positivity is really an indicator to me of how great you're going to be. If you can stay humble when everyone's telling you you're a genius, you're going to go far. And I see it all the time with fighters. You'll see the fighters, they develop, they start winning, they get on like a 7 or 8, great streak. And then they come in and they say, hey, coach, you know what I want to work on today? And I'm like, oh, tell me, what are we going to work on today? They begin to think they're in charge. They begin to think that. And so immediately I know you're in for a fall. You're in for a crash. So you have to have the talent. You have to have the coachability. You have to have the ability to listen and absorb the information. But you also have to have the ability to deal with your success. And you and I both know people, really talented people that just couldn't handle it outside the cage, either with drugs or with whatever it may be, even just thinking they're the stuff. So as I get older, I try to tell them now, listen, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen to you. You are going to have a great time. You're going to get super successful, but that's not your test. That fighting in the cage isn't a hard thing for you. And if it is, you're good enough at it, well, you'll get even better. The test is going to be outside of that. Can you handle the rest of what this sport does to you? Because fame is such a weird thing. It brings out the worst in people. So just how they deal with that pressure is something that I try to install early. And then I'm very studious about it. I watch them carefully. I say, oh, is this guy starting to get it? Not that I'll put him down. I won't say you're not a genius. I'll always say, just be careful. Just be careful is what I always tell them. You're starting to get there. Be careful. Things are coming. Things are happening. Stay coachable. Keep developing because you don't want to be that guy that hits the ceiling, thinks they know it all, and then everybody passes you. And you see that a lot too. They get to a championship, 2 or 3 fights in, they never win another fight. Like you can just see their development stop. And I think it's an important thing for a trainer to do is to keep no matter where they are, keep them developing, but also make sure that they have the mental capacity to develop. They still hungry. They still want to do it.
That's very interesting. And I love your explanation, Mr. Jackson. I wanted to ask you, what about the dieting? Is that something that is up to them? Or do you, if they become in contract, let's just say with you, do you make them go on a specific regimen?
So what I've learned over the years for myself anyway is that there's no one size fits all for a diet. Some people respond to fasting, some people do, small meals. Everybody has a little bit different that works for them. But you've got to do something, right? Like you can't just you get yo-yo up and down on the weight. You've got to so whatever that looks like for you. And I try to say, okay, what's your diet? What are you doing? How when you're cutting weight? How are you water loading? But some people like the sauna still. Some people like to cut weight in the bath. Some people like to diet almost down to like 5 pounds and then jog. Like it really depends on the person. And a lot of that in your early amateur fights, because really the difference between amateur fights, I mean, there's time limits and rules and whatever, but amateur fights is really for me learning how to compete and learning how to manage your weight. That's kind of it afterwards because it's almost the same thing. You're just not getting paid. So that's where you really should be doing your work on how do I diet? What works? Try different diets. What works for me? Talk to different people. Sometimes we get a lot of wrestlers that have been dieting forever and they've already got a system that I don't want to mess with. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
variance, but you do have to do something. Diet is, as you know, is so important.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And I would love the viewers to be aware of that. And so let's get off onto some other questions. So, can we talk about a little bit about Steve Garcia,
Yeah,
the
well,
Mean Machine,
that's a good
the,
name.
the Mean Machine? I
Yeah,
lied
that's
to a
what
few
does.
people and told them he was my little brother. No, I'm just playing.
Yeah, that's it.
I love
That's
the
it.
kid. I love him.
Yeah,
He's taller than me.
yeah. Can you
I'm
imagine?
5'11". I was 6 foot. I thought. The doc said I was 5'11 and 3/4 just recently, but
Close enough.
I saw the kid is 6 foot fighting at
Yeah,
featherweight, but it
yeah.
doesn't look like he's drawn. I'm not sure. Because it's an advantage when you're young and it doesn't wear down your body too much to cut substantial amount of weight, especially with height. You're not only longer and taller, but then now you're heavier. It's just that when your body continues to grow, obviously, and it's time to go to 155, let's just say you're getting a little bit older, and now it's starting to become more of a disadvantage. You're not able to put as much on afterwards. You're starting to feel a bit more sluggish and looking more drawn. How is he looking with the weight cut? Like, as far as whatever you could say, is he comfortable
But
still at featherweight? Anything you could just tell me about Steve, man. I love him.
he is. That's a great question again. So yeah, the thing we learned with Steve is, and when you have the problems that you're saying, which are those are real problems, is what you do in between the fights are almost more important than dieting for the fight. So as long as we keep his weight down in between the fights, he doesn't have to cut as much. He's not as drawn. It's not as was so hard on your body. And I think that's one of the secrets to his longevity is that he is in between fights, staying on his diet, staying disciplined. He's not blowing up. He used to blow up and get in before we really dialed it in. He'd get big and he missed weight once or twice and just trying to figure it out, but he's got a real good handle on it now where he's not getting into the heavyweight stuff where he's much more, he's always 15, 20 out. So a couple
Oh,
weeks of
that's good.
dieting, yeah, a couple weeks of dieting, a little more running, and he can dial it in well. So he always has, his weight cuts are always fun, but they're much easier now than they used to be. And again, because that's the discipline that he's trying to enact in between the fights.
Yeah, because it was interesting to me how, just to use an example, Jose Aldo was having so much problems early in his career after coming from WEC to UFC, making featherweight. And later on in his career, what was like a decade later, he's able to make bantamweight
Right.
135 because you would find out he never really paid a nutritionist and didn't take his diet that serious. He was just on raw talent and training and so forth and technique. So I was just curious. It's good to know basically that Steve had some problems with the weight that he took care of, and now he's dialed in.
You can really tell in his last, what is 7 performances or whatever it's been, he's doing a great job of his strength and conditioning. He's doing a great job technically, and he's also, I mean, again, in MMA at that level, you have to have a nutritionist. You have to have all these tools. So yeah, he's really dialed it in now.
Yeah. So do you got anything? What do you think is happening next for him? Is you guys
I don't know
looking at
yet.
him?
We're waiting. We're waiting for an opponent. He was just training this morning, so we're waiting for an opponent and to see what's going to happen. But yeah, he's right up there. I mean, I'm sure we're ready into top 10, top five. So hopefully that'll happen soon. And yeah, the sky's the limit with him now. He's doing exceptionally well. So I can't wait to see what his future looks like.
Yeah, he's definitely looking good. So how about Gable Stevenson? How's he coming along?
He's doing well. He had a great fight his last fight in Mexico. He really got tested a little bit, which is what I wanted to see.
No.
Our opponent there hit a beautiful spinning hook kick right on his head, and I was like, "Holy cow!" And I looked at him to see, can he take a shot? Because that's always the first question with a guy like that. And didn't even he said, "Ah, it didn't even hurt me." So I was like, "That's what I needed to see." So that fight answered that question for me. And he's still got a ways to develop. We still got, it's not wrestling, but he's so just an incredible athlete. I mean, one of the strongest, fastest people I've ever seen. Such
Wow.
a sweetheart of a person. I mean, he loves his wife. He just had a child. He's a total family man. And he's one of those guys that you enjoy working with. Not just that I got to go to work and get this guy better. You really look forward to seeing him. You really look forward to working with him. And he's developing well. I mean, we've still got a ways to go to get him to where he can be. But yeah, he's right on his path.
Now that's very fortunate, and I'm sure that from everything I'm hearing about these gentlemen, it seems to be at an uppity gym where they have a lot of good energy going on through there, and that's, in my opinion, those are recipes to success. What happens when you got a guy that comes in with a bad attitude? Do you get personal with them and talk to him and see if you could, or you just, how do you handle that?
Well, usually, I mean, if it's really bad and we got to kick them out, we got to kick them out. I try not to kick people out. I try to give them chances. I try to get them to be better people as far as handling their life outside the cage. Because, I've made my mistakes and I'm no saint, and a lot of us have. So you try to give that grace that maybe other people gave you and give that to them. But a lot of it's the gym culture. The fighters themselves will kind of police the guy, like, hey, don't be a jerk. You know what I mean? Like, calm down or whatever. So there's a pretty good culture in there now where they'll take care of their own, and if it's a real problem, then I'll step in. But I try not to step in unless there's an issue. If I'm micromanaging everybody, first of all, I don't have the time. But secondly, you can't want it more than they do, right? You can't want the win more than they do. You can't want them to try to have a positive life more than they do. They've got to do it themselves a little bit. And so I encourage them. I tell them that, listen, if you're a positive person, these are the things that are going to happen. If you're a sourpuss, so to speak, these are the things that are going to happen. And then it's up to them. Like the choice at that point has to be theirs. So I try to guide, but not micromanage.
Wow, that's interesting. That's very interesting. So, if you could choose for a young kid that dreams of competing in MMA, which in order, if you got a kid, right, and he comes to you, he's young, he's ready, how would you start him off? What would you, very young, he's young, what would you start him off doing first? Would you start him off with jits? Would you start him off with wrestling? Would you start him off in a different sport? Would you start him off like Lomachenko's dad did with ballet? Would you put him
Right.
in soccer to get the wind up and their
Uh-huh.
legs and their core right? Like, what would you do?
Wrestling is the best base for me. And there's a couple of reasons. It does, the sport itself teaches you some great mental toughness. But what I really like about wrestling is who controls the takedown controls the fight. If you're able to sprawl and not get taken down, then you can, sprawl and brawl. If you're able to take them down, if they want to sprawl and brawl you, then you control where the fight happens.
Hmm.
So jujitsu is not in itself something that you can do without the ability to take somebody into jujitsu. Same thing with boxing. If you're the greatest boxer ever, but you can't stop the takedown, your boxing skill literally doesn't matter because this is the first thing I'm going to do is take you down. So wrestling is what controls the fight. Who controls that? Either stopping them taking you down or being able to take them down. So that's the sport I start in because then you, no matter what, you're in control of the fight.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. So, from wrestling, then how would you, what would be the next art that you,
Right,
jit?
jujitsu and boxing and jujitsu. So on kicks coming after the boxing, boxing and elbows from Muay Thai, and then the jujitsu on the ground. Right, once you get taken down, you have to know how to control them, what to watch out for, how to do your ground and pound, how to do your submission holds, and then on your feet, you've got to know how to box. You've got to know how to move your head, where to put things, and it needs to be a little bit modified boxing. Right, like you can't do like a Pernell Whitaker down by the hips. You're going to get kneed in the head, but you do need head movement. You do need these things. Muay Thai in itself is too a little bit rigid as far as they do a lot of standing tall and sweeps and all that stuff, and I really like all that stuff. But
Hmm.
the kind of the movement, the ferocity of boxing needs to be a high priority early on, in my opinion.
I love that. I love that. And I agree with that. That's how I would have it set up. Yeah, definitely. And another thing I want to rewind a little bit, staying like Steve Garcia, staying in shape. A lot of it is how are you doing in between camps, right? So if you're staying in shape, it makes it a lot the weight cut a lot easier.
Right, absolutely, and it just makes your life healthier. You know what I mean? Like if you yo-yo where you're gaining 50, 60 pounds and you got to lose that before the next fight, it's just not healthy to do that. It's going to be hard on your heart, and you got to think. And again, as I get older, it's harder for kids to think this way, but you want to think long term. You like my body, as I'm sure yours is. We're just beat up, man. Our shoulders, everything hurts all the time, and as I think about this next generation of fighters, I don't want them to do that, to like I can't work out like I used to because I was such an idiot when I worked out. Like it was, I always call it the sins of my youth, just not training smart. So that kind of stuff really has long term effects. So I really try to preach that as I'm sure you do, like in
Absolutely.
between fights. Yeah, just watch your diet. Exercise in between fights. And also in between fights is where you're going to get better. If you're just
Hmm.
training camp to camp to camp, you're just training game plan to game plan to game plan. That's what boxers did, but boxers came in there with 100 amateur fights already. They had already worked on their all that baseline stuff. Well, we don't have 100 amateur fights, so you need to be in between camps. You need to be training and getting better and figuring stuff out because again, we don't have an amateur program like boxing does.
Yeah, that reminds me of my son's boxing coach, Brandon Flawless Gonzalez, actually told me when I asked him who he thought was going to win out of the Errol Spence Jr. bout versus Terrence Bud Crawford. And he said, I'm going to lean towards Bud because he stays in shape in between fights.
A smart man.
And you also reminded me about Patty, somebody that blows up a lot. It didn't seem like he did this in this last fight, and I thought he did really well, especially going against Gaethje and getting poked in the eye really bad. But I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you a serious question. Who did you have winning before that fight happened out of Gaethje and Pimblett?
So here's a weird thing about me. I never make predictions ever
Hmm.
because I don't know. Like stylistically, you can say, oh, this, that, and the other thing, but it's such a dynamical process. What I mean by that is this guy should win, but I didn't know that he twisted his knee 3 weeks into camp, but he still trained anyway and he can't move on it or
Oh,
whatever.
okay.
So there's so many if, ands, or buts that I never make. Oh, it drives everybody crazy because I used to get the, hey, who's going to win? And I always say, I have the exact same predictive ability as a normal fan. Like if you looked at our odds of predicting fights, I'm sure it would be very close. Now, this isn't my fighter. Now my fighter, I'm always biased. I always think we're going to win. I'm just an optimist.
Yeah.
But even when we don't, but yeah, I never. A weird thing about me is I'll never make predictions.
Well, ain't nothing wrong with that. I was just curious, who did you think was going to win, though?
I honestly didn't know. Like again,
Yeah,
sometimes and it's weird. Sometimes I'll show up and I'll be like, "Man, this guy is so good. He is going to kill him." And then
yeah.
I get him gets killed. I'm like, "What the?" You know what I mean? Like
What
it's
did
just
happen?
wait. Like you should have on paper this guy should have won. And that's the other thing is like again, you were talking about Rashad. So one of the biggest deals there was when we had Rashad fight Chuck Liddell. I have never, and I've been doing this 30 some years before or since, I have never had the press. The press is always, what they are. Sometimes they're like, oh, you're an idiot. Sometimes they call you a genius, whatever. But what I never had so many people going, oh my God, you took the fight against Chuck Liddell? All Chuck Liddell does is sprawl and brawl. At the time, all Rashad did was take you down. So they're like, he's going to sprawl on Rashad and he's going to knock him out. Like that's the stupidest fight. They were treating us like we were the dumbest people in the world for taking that fight. Fast forward, we knock out Chuck with an overhand right. Like no one saw that coming. No one expected it. It was a big upset, and people forget how big of an upset that was. However, if you were saying, well, on paper, right, like Chuck Liddell kills Rashad at that point in his career, all Rashad did was takedowns. Chuck Liddell, he's fought Randy Couture, he's fought all these amazing wrestlers and stopped them. So those are the other things too, is you just never know. The guy came in with a good plan, and wow, it was incredible. So it's so hard to predict that stuff.
Yeah, no, I hear you and I agree with you. There's so many variables. I like to watch the weigh-ins,
Yeah.
see how confident they are, and then everything. It all matters to me. So then, can you just give me a crazy story you never told nobody coming up in MMA, something funny that we could leave the fans with that they could
Let's
go, oh
see.
my gosh.
Let's see a crazy story. Well, I will tell you this. It's not really crazy, but I will. Let's leave the fans with it. You would think it was crazy if you're a normal person. So,
Okay.
and I don't like to throw anybody in the bus, so I'm going to do a positive story. My One of the differences between my fighters that have good careers and
Hmm.
my fighters that are world champions is the end of the workout. They always want to do more. So I always bring up Holly Holm, great boxer, great MMA fighter. When we used to do these mountain runs with her, we would go up onto the Sandia Crest, which is about 10,500 feet,
Yeah.
and we would do these sprints. So we'd run about 3.5, 4 miles to these stairs that are carved kind of in the side of the mountain. And I would just sprint them until they're puking. People are defecating on themselves, blood and lung. I mean, like I would get them as near death as I could possibly get them in a reasonable way.
I
I mean, I
love it.
just kill them. And at the end of all of those, ordinarily we would walk. There's a 1/4 mile walk, kind of uphill back, and Holly would always run. She would be just dead. And this crazy lady would always run. John Jones, when he would spar, he would always want to do 2 or 3 more rounds than everybody else who couldn't get up off the ground. And that doesn't seem crazy. Like it's not a weird story. But man, when you're completely exhausted, when you're cooked, and you look up and this person next to you is running again, you think they're insane. You're like, that's the craziest person I've ever seen in my life. And so that's crazy in a good way. That's crazy in a way that that's what you want to try to accomplish. When everybody else is cooked and done, if you can do one more, that craziness leads to world titles.
Man, cardio endurance is just so important. And not only does it help your recovery if you get days, kind of like when Condit kicked GSP. You were right
Yeah.
there, and he recovered so fast, and he was smart. He grabbed him too, took him down. You know, but for these people that are like at sea level, is it important that they don't just go to the elevation so high? They want to crawl before they walk? Do they want to kind of go like, is it okay to go straight to like super high elevation? Or would it be smarter to go somewhere like 3,000 above sea level first? Does that have to
It's
have
actually Right. It's actually better to train lower altitude and sleep higher altitude if you can, if you have a choice about it. But what I do is the competition. If you are going to compete high altitude, my suggestion is get there early, get there a month early if you can, really acclimate to that. Because if you are at sea level and you have to go fight in Mexico City, that is exhausting. It really is. So making sure that you get to that altitude and train at that altitude if you're going to fight there, super important, and make sure you give enough time to acclimate to it, because yeah, I've seen a lot of great fighters gas out because they were at altitude and they just weren't used to it.
Fabricio Verdum versus Cain Velasquez? Cain didn't look the same. Thank God Cain's free. How about that? They
Yeah,
freed
good,
Cain.
good.
Welcome
Yes, sir.
home, Cain.
Yes, sir. That's
Uh,
right. That's right.
no, well, with the Mexico thing, do you remember that Cain looked tired? But
Yeah.
Verdum, he was like heading downhill. You
Yep.
know, you're right about that, Greg, man. I'm gonna let you go here. I know you probably got some stuff to do, man. I really appreciate you, Greg,
I
coming on.
appreciate you.
It was an honor. I'm super excited about this and thankful. If you could maybe give a good word for me to Steve Garcia, see if I
Oh
can
yeah,
get him
I'll
on.
let him know. I'll see him tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'll tell him. I'll
Or,
text you his number when I see him.
or even the preacher's daughter. I love her too.
Well,
Man,
we'll
I
see what
watched that.
we can do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anything, you know. But if you could give me a subscribe and man,
Gotcha.
I
Right back
appreciate
at
you,
you, boss.
man. You know what I mean?
Thank
You're
you,
doing
brother.
a
I
lot for the
appreciate it.
kids. You took the time out. Just
Uh-huh.
so you know, a lot of kids watch my because of my
Good.
son, and I
Right.
don't curse, so it's okay if you would or whatever. But I just like to spread a lot of positive knowledge
Oh, man.
from your mind, and it's a blessing that we're able to do this. So
Yes,
thank you
sir.
very
Well, you
much.
keep doing it. You stay positive, boss. I'm in your corner now.
Heck yeah, man. I appreciate that, Greg. Well,
Worries,
thank you,
brother.
folks. Hey, if you got anything that you want to speak about, to ask Greg about, I can message him. You know,
Absolutely.
anything you want to comment about, man, he's a really kind guy. And when he has time, he'll let me know what the answer to whatever you had to say. And I
Right.
really appreciate you guys. If you could share this, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you.